the Nats.io community office hours. We probably have some stuff starting up on socials as well. Those take a little bit of time. But yeah, we're gonna wait for some people to kind of pour in a little bit as we talk. For those of you who might be new to these office hours, hi, my name's Jeremy, and today we have Seth back, coming back to join us. He's been on a previous episode, but I figured it would be fun, and I'm very grateful for Seth to be able to join us today. I figured it would be fun for Seth to join us because we're going to be talking a lot about our recent kind of products slash features that we've launched this week in Synadia Cloud. And so there's going to be a lot of fun things to talk about. And of course, as always, these office hours are, while we have some things to talk about, they're here for folks to show up and to ask questions. So if you are here, go ahead and ask any questions you want in the chat, literally anything about NATs or distributed systems. And if you are, just joining us now, go ahead and say hi in the chat. Tell us where you're from. Introduce yourself. We'd love to get to know a little bit more about you and your use case. Maybe even tell us how you're using NATs. I think that would be fun as well. I'm going to go ahead and pull up YouTube and make sure that we're streaming. Looks like we're good and live. Just so I know that chat works, go ahead and say hi, everybody who's joined us today. And we will get this party started. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. And Seth, do you want to just tell everybody else where you hail from?
Spokane, Washington. So the Pacific Northwest. Love it. Right now, I'm actually traveling with the family, though. We're on the Oregon coast, so we're kind of enjoying the beach life. I'm working; they're out having fun. So that's kind of the kind of the situation. But yeah, no, glad to join y'all. But yeah,
You can't beat that Pacific, yeah, that Pacific Northwest weather. Can't beat it.
Yeah, love it.
All right, let me pull this up. So our agenda today, again, folks, come and enjoy us, say hi, and we'll kind of kick this off with a couple blog posts from the Synadia blog. The reason I want to cover this is I think this is really exciting for community members because, especially for Synadia Cloud, the ability now to use your own self-hosted NATS clusters in Synadia Cloud, which I know this was a huge feature request. There's basically, we've had Synadia Cloud and we've had Synadia Platform, and Synadia Cloud has been like, hey, you can use our global cluster and be a tenant in there, and then Synadia Platform's like, hey, you can use this as an enterprise version. So we had like these two far ends of the spectrum, and I feel like we have something that's really meeting folks in the middle, which is like you might have your own NATS cluster, but you want to you want to use like a cloud dashboard to kind of manage, monitor everything like that. Tell me a little bit more, Seth, about like how you guys thought through this problem, or how long have you been thinking about this idea?
Yeah, no, honestly, it's been on my mind ever since I joined the control plane team over a year ago. Just this idea of like, the goal was to build a really useful kind of cool UI around the whole NATS cluster management. And so instantly I was thinking, well, I have a NATS cluster. I'd love to hook it up to this. But with the different deployment models, whether it's enterprise kind of on-prem and the way that worked versus with the cloud, right? The hosting the whole control plane is a thing. And so as a process, you have all the ops around that. And so the idea was, well, hey, we have a version of control plane running, and it's Synadia Cloud. And right now it's just backed by NGS, the global supercluster. But what if I don't need sort of that level of like points of presence all over the world? What if I just want to utilize the UI and the visualizations and the ease of use with my own cluster? So it's been on our radar for a long time. There was just obvious questions about like, how do we maintain the security if you have a private NATS cluster that you don't want to expose to the internet? How do we hook it up to control plane? How do we make sure that that it's going to function and get all of the reliability and the things that you would get either with on-prem or just using it with cloud, but being able to bring your own cluster. So yeah, so there was a little bit of technical things to figure out, but yeah, it's been something that the whole team has been excited to get launched. It's been in the works for quite a while now. So yeah.
Yeah, and I gotta say, it works really, really well. And actually, it's like to me, it feels pretty affordable because if you use Synadia Cloud, you're kind of being billed by one of the pieces of feedback we get, and I don't think we've, quite gotten pricing exactly right. I think there's probably going to be more iterations in the future, but like, folks that are like, hey, I need more connections or I need more, this or that. And it doesn't feel like we're necessarily pricing exactly to the value prop. And that's because everybody's very different and now they're utilizing NATs. So that's an added challenge. But with this, you don't get like, you pay like a flat $50 a month, right?
Mhm.
And then you can run up to a 9 node cluster. It's actually pretty cool to get all that management for that little price. So like this could also be a really affordable thing for folks who may have even been priced out of using the global cluster and might not need that whole like global presence. Um,
Mhm.
the other thing to consider too is that you can take this system and you could also leaf node it into like the global cluster. And so if you do need those points of presence for maybe some things, but not everything, that could be like a really cool. You're kind of piggybacking off of the global cluster, right?
Yeah, yeah, and you would get all of the, you could manage everything through the same user interface. It's all right there. Yeah, that was another huge, I think, sort of value prop, or one thing we were excited about, of, run your own local cluster with however many nodes you need and all of the things that you might need internally, and then for the pieces that you do need to go more global, um, it's all right there. It's all in the same UI, the same interactions. Everything would feel very familiar. So yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I remember I was making a video the other day. When by the way, we do have a brand new kind of YouTube series. If I go to YouTube right now, uh, and let's just go to Synadia's channel. And here's us. We're live. If you go to playlists, you can see a Synadia Cloud and platform walkthrough. So if you're interested in kind of like using Synadia Cloud, we now have like a full, 6 video. I think I'm gonna make it 8 video by the end of the day today series that kind of walks through all the UI and how like how this benefits you, like how to go through manage Jetstream assets, like add users, stuff like that. But one thing that I think is really cool is as I was making those videos, I went through adding a remote system via Synadia private link. And it's right here. It's Jeremy's Mac. And I totally forgot about it until I came back this morning. I was like, oh, I should probably show off like how this all works. And I was like, oh, this is still running on my Mac. It's literally just a NAT server that's like running, in a tab in one of my terminals, just as demonstration. But it's kind of fun. You can kind of see where my Mac goes to sleep and stuff like that. But these are all the little agents that are kind of connecting into, to the SCP metrics collector, the SCP agent. They're kind of connecting into my broader system, which is really cool. So you get all of this stuff. I mean, I only have one node here, but you can get a whole kind of cluster topology graph of your clusters. If you're running 3 nodes or you're running a super cluster or whatever, you can get all the information on that. You can get all the information on your connections if you've seen this in Synadia Cloud. So there's a lot of cool things that you could do with this. Not only that, but also just like create and manage accounts. Rather than using NSC, you can just say, hey, here's the Bob account. And there we go. It's going to be added and pushed to my server, which is running on my computer. So really, really neat that like especially with Synadia Private Link handling all the tunneling and everything between this, that I could have a server running on my computer. It's private. It doesn't have a public URL. Yet Synadia Cloud's managing all of it, and it just feels seamless. So very, very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. No, that's private link was a big piece of kind of enabling this, where you're able to kind of, in a secure way, punch through, your NATs, or get a connection out to control plane. So you don't have to you don't have to worry about DNS and publicly routing your NAT server, or creating, exceptions, firewall exceptions, or any of those sorts of things. It all just kind of works. Um, yeah, and then the import functionality, yeah, not having to use NSC, but when you connect your system, we have the ability to kind of import accounts from other operators, or the operator that's running that system directly into uh, your your system that you're running, your bring your own NAT system. And you can do some really interesting things with imports too. You can import accounts from other operators and other systems and bring them into this one, and it'll just resign your JOTs and push them to your cluster. So there's some really interesting things you can do just operationally, if you're wanting to kind of move around accounts and things. So
Oh yeah,
um,
because at the end of the day, they're just all JOTs and N keys, right? So like
they're
you
all,
can,
yep,
yeah, importing from other systems is like,
yeah. becomes it becomes we kind of with the CLI we have a kind of a TUI that we walk you through selecting your operator. Do you want to do the accounts? Do you want to do the users with the accounts? And it'll just kind of bring it all over and make sure it all works and gets out to your cluster. So yeah, lots of options with bring your own nats. So.
That's so cool. Yeah, so I've been waiting for this. I was just telling Seth right before we joined that I have my Raspberry Pi cluster right back here that's running like an old version of Synadia control plane, which was wishful thinking on my part that I would like stay up and like update it from version to version. So I'm like the perfect candidate for like, hey, I want to just run this thing in Synadia Cloud because I don't want to have to deal with updates. I just want things updated for me automatically. So that's really cool. Anything else that you want to talk about regarding kind of like kind of the bring your own NATS ecosystem, like plans for the future, what you guys want to be able to do with it, or any feedback that you guys want to try to get from the community?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one of the big feedbacks that we've received so far is having a trial for this. A lot of people want to kind of kick the tires and try it out without having to commit. So that is coming. I will say that we are in the works trying to get sort of a 14-day trial where you can connect your NAT system and give it a try without having to commit to it. So that was one of the major pieces of feedback that we got that we're working towards. And I think mostly the benefit of it is that as we release new features in NATS, which or not NATS in control plane, which we're continually doing, those get pushed into cloud, and you'll just get access to all of those. That's one of the with our project roadmap, all of the things that we want to continue to bring to cloud and to continue to improve the experience there. You'll just get those, whether it's the live stream viewing, operations kind of UI around KV interactions with the Jetstream assets. We're planning on some improvements with the visualizations and the metrics. I mean, all of that. The other interesting thing that you get access to is the cloud API, and that's one of the things that we've gotten a lot of good feedback from. How do you easily create users? How do you easily share streams across accounts? With the cloud API, we have very convenient abstractions to do all of that. So you don't have to, especially like sharing Jetstream assets, right? You've got to have the flow control channel and you've got to, subject shared across accounts. And there's all these technicalities with the cloud API. It's like a real simple, hey, share this with this account, and then on the other account you accept the share and you can mirror it and you can do all of that. So that's been a huge feedback that we've gotten that people have really enjoyed. Is it's just easy. We make some of these like user management and sharing and stream management easy with the API. And if your NAT system is hooked up to the API, then you can or your NAT system is hooked up to cloud, you can use a cloud API to interact with it. So that's kind of something that I just want to make sure that highlights that if people don't know about it, the cloud API is there, and it's an easy way to do a lot of things. So.
Oh, that's actually so nice, especially when you have like, let's say maybe you're managing a system that's like running at the edge or in like some remote location, and then you're using private link to essentially hook it up to Synadia Cloud. You can centrally manage that without having to kind of reach into it or create your own constructs around it. Like it's the same kind of thing, which is just really cool. So that's awesome. And I think somebody Bastian is posting some logs here of him running a NAT server, I'm assuming. That was a mistake. Okay, cool. Glad to know that was an accident. But yeah, so like Seth mentioned, and this is something we need to promote a lot more. This is one of the videos I'm actually going to be hopefully putting out today or tomorrow, which is like, yeah, we have this REST API that's really easy to access that gives you basically everything that you can do in Synadia Cloud right here. You can do via the API, which is just awesome. So
and we do have a Golang sort of client for the API as well. So it's specific to Go right now, but if you're developing your own, IEC tooling or anything like that, which we've had customers use, they bring it in the Go sort of the Go SDK, and it interacts, kind of abstracts, and makes it easy to interact with the API directly from there. So lots of options.
Even
yeah.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look at that.
We definitely have people that are running control plane on prem, but it's the same API as cloud, and they utilize the SDK in their IAC code for doing provisioning of assets and resources and deployments. So yeah.
Super, super cool. So I think this feature has kind of just made Synadia Cloud or even just Synadia Control Plane for your own systems just much more accessible. So I encourage folks to try it out. We'll probably let you know when the trial is here. But I think that's probably a good segue because I know we have some limited time, Seth. For those of you who are joining us in the chat on socials and YouTube, on Twitch. Go ahead and ask some questions. Ask away. If you have any questions about Nats, about Synadia Cloud, now's the time to do so, and we can kind of address your questions as they come in. But let's talk about yet another feature because this one isn't big enough. That kind of we announced that's entering private beta, which is private beta of Synadia Cloud application. So I'm gonna just because I think this is a good, well-written blog post by Kevin. I'm gonna just read through this, and then I want us to kind of add some commentary and flavor here, and then I want to hear like how the team, kind of put all of this together because I think this is actually just such a cool feature. I know some of us have been or some of us in the community have been following, the development of Nex, the Nats execution engine, but this is kind of the Synadia evolution of that. While Nex is kind of open source, this is kind of like a layer of tooling that I think really leans into the power of Nex. And is obviously all Nex under the hood. But let's talk through this. So, building applications is more than just typing code, especially for large-scale distributed systems. There are numerous aspects to consider, such as tagging resources, managing idle resources to control costs, handling logs, events, traces, metrics, authorization, authentication, fail and restore processes, and multi-tenancy. By the way, I talk about this in my microservices video, which is like I feel like Nats can handle like theoretically can handle a lot of these things, right? And I love this because this is kind of the real implementation of like Nats can handle a lot of these things that normally we would reach for like a lot of different technologies for, right? Very, very cool. Okay, and this is all before addressing like messaging, data storage and retrieval, or file and blob management. For years, Nats has become the de facto standard for building messaging applications. With the introduction of Jetstream, we gained the capability to persist highly available streams to withstand server unavailability. And soon after, key value and object stores further enhanced our applications for free without requiring new integration or dependency. Okay, and this is kind of where we get into at least what we've observed at Synadia, and I think this is like what basically motivated the creation of Nex, the creation of Synadia Cloud applications. But a common pattern we see today is teams starting with Nats for messaging and quickly adopting additional features, embracing what we call a nothing but Nats approach. That phrase, like you've probably seen it a little bit in the community, but like it flows so much around Synadia. Yeah, we love saying it for some reason. It's just kind of caught on.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's, yeah, I think because it really represents sort of all of the things that you can do with Nats, but that Nats makes so easy, right? Like it's a paradigm shift a little bit in your thinking, but once you kind of adopt that nothing but Nats mentality, I mean, things just become easier in a lot of ways. So I think anyways, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So many applications can rely entirely on just Nats. Now, with various applications and services depending on your Nats infrastructure, wouldn't it be great to deploy those applications using the same system? The answer is a resounding yes. We're thrilled to announce the private beta of a third foundational pillar of Nats after connectivity and data, which is workloads. Built on our open source project, Nex, this marks the beginning of a journey towards a powerful set of features reinforcing the nothing but Nats style, a specialized form of cloud native pattern that extends to the edge. And this is an important bit because there's a lot of tooling around cloud native. And we're obviously part of the CNCF, and so we are a cloud native solution. But over the years, one of the things that we found that we actually just like do really well at, that Nats does really well at, is edge, right? Is in this like highly distributed environment, and also an environment with constraints. The cloud is all about elasticity and like infinite constraints, whereas like edge is very different, where you're stamping out some of these patterns, but in a very constrained sort of way. So we need to kind of think a little bit differently about how like edge patterns apply to this. So Synadia Cloud applications provide a managed turnkey experience. Define your application components, specify where and how you want them to run, upload your software, and let Synadia Cloud handle the rest. So this kind of goes into now explaining what an application is, what the heck is a component, what are all these things. An application is a logically related set of components. A component is a specification for a workload that can be deployed. A workload is anything that can be executed. Workloads can be long-running services like native binary executables, OCI images. They can be functions like JavaScript or WebAssembly. If your service can be compiled into just a binary, then we'll run it in a secure sandbox without the extra hassle or unpredictable packaging. So we have like multiple formats, and one of the things that I really liked is that Next started with like binaries, like back to basics, like not even like, container is the low level primitive of Kubernetes. It's like not even that. It's like, nope, we're binaries, and we'll support OCI, but like we're going to start with the very bare bones basics, which is actually really nice. Like if you're using a language like Go or like Rust or something that can do like statically, compiled binaries, you're going to be in for a really good time, like operationally, because you can just literally ship those as is. Now, if you need to ship containers, like we're bringing support on for that as well. But you don't have to do containers, which is kind of a nice thing. Um, I also just love that you can be like, here's a long running workload, like a container or a binary, living alongside like a function, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Yep.
really cool paradigm.
Yeah, no, I think the functions combined with the workloads, because it just depends on the level of complexity, right? Some things you just need, you need a short bit of code to react to messages as they come over subjects, and that's it. Other things you need to deploy are a little bit more complex, and it supports both, right? You can do both, and you can have both of them as part of the same application, right? So that's the other beauty of it, is an application can be multiple of these components, and Synadia, the application framework, will make sure that they're all running and doing the right thing. So yeah.
Very, very cool. Folks in chat, if you have an application that you're running, I'm curious to know, is it just a single binary? Is it multiple binaries as microservices, or is it a mix of like different binaries and functions? And like, how are you managing your application stuff today? Because I'd like to know what your application architecture looks like, and if something like this seems like it would be a cool fit. So Cliff says single binary, yeah, keeping it simple, which is great. I'm going to read on while other folks kind of jump in and say like what their application architecture kind of looks like. Um, so if you're familiar with other app scheduling products, you probably know about the concept of application specification. In Kubernetes land, it's called a manifest. To create a new application specification, you follow the command used, which creates a new manifest. And this is kind of what a manifest, or not a manifest, what a spec looks like. It's just basic JSON. It looks pretty familiar. You give it a version, some description, then you have a list of components. And I actually really like this because we've talked about this quite a bit as we were creating this inception of what is an application. And generally, in some cases an application might be one single binary, but in other cases it might be a combination of those things, where you have maybe, and like it could even be as simple as, hey, we have this application that we're running, we're running the web app, like to serve up web requests, and then we have a worker app that's like also doing background jobs, like typical basic web workflow. But you have two applications or two workloads that you're essentially running to run this application, right? And so I like this idea of components where you can say, hey, there's a function here, there's a binary here, there's another binary here. And then for each of those components, you get to choose. This is the really cool part. You get to choose like where it goes. How many instances of it and what region. And I know there's some other schedulers that like have this, but it's generally been like fairly tacked on, and also all that stuff has to exist for it to work. And the cool thing about Synadia Cloud is we already have all of those regions available to you, right? And so anywhere, and I'm not sure all the regions that are supported or will be supported in the beta, but I think the idea is basically anywhere there's a point of presence for NATs will be a point of presence for like these workloads, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that's the goal, is to expand, the regions where you can deploy. And again, I don't know what the initial launch will look like, but ultimately, there's no functional reason why, as this gets rolled out, that they won't expand into all the regions. So yeah.
Awesome. Bastian says there's mixed, but they're not even close to MVP. They have some microservices in Go, some PHP front ends, React Native, Node.js, server, but yeah, like lots of stuff, right? Lots of stuff to manage. And so I think it's going to be cool to be able to separate these applications out into components. And the idea here is that the application kind of gets deployed like in one go with these components, right?
Yeah. And the other thing that's interesting too is it's versioned as well. So you can have your application and you create a version of it, and it can have, the specific, the specific workloads, the components in there. But if you want to roll to a new version and either add a component or change a component, you can add it to the spec, push it as a different version, and then you're able to say, hey, I want this version of this application to be deployed. If you need to roll back, you can roll it back to the old version. It just allows for a really flexible sort of definition of what your application is, and then a very easy way to deploy it. So,
Very cool. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, like, this is 34 lines of code, but like, or of JSON, which is mostly just brackets. But like, this is actually pretty concise for what it's doing, right? We're doing like you can pull off a multi-region deployment here, multiple instances across regions with different policies kind of defining how that looks. And so I really do like this. And then he kind of shows the code of like, here's what the echo function actually looks like. So you get to say, basically all a function is it's something that's tied to a subject in Nats, and that executes the function. It's as simple as that, where all of this stuff kind of ties back to the Nats ecosystem in a way. So we have this echo function that we've created, and then we say trigger subjects, hello.function. So this could be literally whatever. It could be like math.add, right? And then we execute that function. And it's just a simple bit of JavaScript to be able to do that. And again, this lives right alongside your actual like application, which I just absolutely love. The other thing that's cool about functions is that we have this idea of like host services, and these are basically that these functions automatically have a connection to Nats, right? Secure, authenticated connection, and then they could interact with these different parts of the host services, like set stuff on the KV, or get stuff from a KV, object store, microservices, stuff like that. So there's all kinds of little host services that will continue to add to these functions. So you can just have a little bit of glue between your Nats applications, or use functions as a way to kind of glue between your Nats applications. So we're really trying to lean into like, hey, what does because I don't think there's a lot of value in just like pure functions unless there's an ecosystem to complement it, right? And this is why AWS Lambda is so powerful for people, is because it's really that kind of glue code between all of the other services inside of AWS. If you just pulled out Lambda and gave it to someone, they'll be like, cool, I have like a runtime I could use, but like, and maybe I can make some HTTP requests to other things, but like if I don't have this easy access at my fingertips to all these other services, then it's not really valuable. And so the fact that we have things like Object Store and KV, being able to invoke other NATS services all at our fingertips without in a secure way, without having to do all this configuration and junk, I think it actually makes for a pretty viable like function platform, which I think is really, really neat. Serenzi says, I really enjoyed playing. I'm going to throw this up on the screen. I really enjoyed playing with Nex and Benthos when Nex was introduced the sandbox mode. Yeah, absolutely. Much easier to fiddle with it nowadays than it was at release. Yeah, so just as a like context for those who are watching, Nex originally released in just like Firecracker only mode, and Firecracker is actually what powers AWS Lambda. It's a micro VM, but it's Linux only. And so I think one of the challenges in those early days was like folks who weren't running Linux, like me, I'm running a Mac. You weren't really able to work on Nex all that much, and you couldn't even run it inside like of a virtualization because it's already doing virtualization. So that's always double virtualization is a hard thing to do. And so now we have a version called no sandbox mode, which I think is great for not only for like development, like developing on a Mac, but also for edge devices or if you need access to extra hardware like a GPU. So Firecracker, I think, is really good for isolating workloads in the cloud, but there's going to be a lot of use cases where you might not need that level of isolation, like on an edge device where it's okay to run all of these things non super sandboxed, and you might need extra access to hardware that the Firecracker VM will just not ever give you. So
Yeah.
I think it's a great feature for sure.
Yeah, no, that was 100% my experience too, is trying to, I remember early days before Next was even released, working with the team to try and get things up and running. And Firecracker was always, I mean, it's the best way to do it if you're, like Jeremy said, in the cloud, like you said, and you need to have that strict isolation between workloads, but you're just running in development mode on your own box, trying to get things working, or in an environment where that you don't have to worry about strict isolation on the same host, then yeah, running it without that VM or without that Firecracker micro VM is really makes it much easier to play with,
Yep.
and to explore. So if you haven't looked at Nex since it was first released, because it was too kind of the interactions were too hard to get it, try it again, because it definitely much easier to do now. And then the benefit of obviously applications on cloud is we take care of all that fiddliness
Yeah.
and complexity with Firecracker. Yeah.
Yeah, and I describe Next as kind of this lower level. It doesn't even handle scheduling. It's really just like a low level, like here's a workload, go run it on this node. But I can manage all of these nodes, and I have this like low level API to, like, if I wanted to, I could build my own scheduler using Next. And then Synadia Applications is kind of that expression of like, okay, I have a proper scheduler on this global deployment scale where I can basically tell my applications to go run anywhere, and at whatever level. And so here's kind of a screenshot. And Tony, I saw you on YouTube kind of asking like, oh, I came in late. What does this look like? What is this thing that we're showing off? I think this is a good kind of picture of it. So there's a private beta that's now available. You can find it by going to the Synadia blog and signing up to exactly this page. But there's a private beta of Synadia Cloud Applications, which is Synadia Cloud's kind of version of Nex and a scheduler, but on that kind of global deployment scale. So the idea is that you have an easy way to deploy, binaries, serverless functions, soon containers. And this is kind of what it looks like in the UI, where you deploy your app, you can see it live, you can see kind of the events of it deploying, rolling out, if there's an issue with rolling out, and then also just the version history. And I believe you could roll back versions, right?
Yeah, no, it's super easy to switch between versions. So your version is basically a definition of the components, the workloads that you want in the application. And I mean, it's with that version history dropdown, it's basically drop down, I want to deploy this one, and it handles it all for you. So it even will allow you to go visualize, look at your versions individually, and if you're looking at the one that's not the deployed version, there's a button that basically says roll to this version. So I mean, it makes it very easy. You deploy a new version of the application, you see it start to roll out, you see there's issues with it, click the button, it all goes back. I mean, it's really trying to make managing, deploying, running, visualizing all of your workloads very easy. And then of course all of your connections that come up through these, the individual components inside of your application. I mean, if they connect to NATs and you're sending messages over NATs, then in cloud you get all the visualizations. Hey, what are the connections? What's the message rate? What's the throughput? Like you get all those visualizations of what actually is happening, the metrics of what's actually happening, directly, right through the UI as well. So
Yeah, like if you hit this connections tab, presumably all of these components would kind of show up, in their various forms, like on the connection graph, which is actually kind of cool. Probably like functions probably wouldn't show up if they're not warm, but the idea is here, like, yeah, you can hit a subject and nats, and we would spin up that function from a cold start if we needed to. But yeah, there's just lots of really neat bits here that I think is cool. Like one of them that I really enjoy, and one of the reasons why I'm so glad we didn't start with containers, is like container registries can be a pain in the ass. um, and like and it's almost like one of those problems that like Kubernetes is like, yeah, we're not going to solve. We'll let other people kind of solve for that, and then then you have all of this junk around like pull through caches and like all kinds of stuff and proxies and proxies and proxies, um, and and sure, like you're probably going to have to utilize a container registry when you use containers with this, but you don't have to use a container, and you actually get a lot of benefit because we're able to put like your binaries directly in like the Nats object store. It's like in Nats, it's quick and easy to get at. The security's already there. You don't have to be like, here's my username and password for my container registry. Like it's already there. It's fully integrated. I think that's a really nice solution because I know that there's been plenty of problems that have come with dealing with like just container polls in general, right?
Mhm.
The fact that that doesn't like really exist here is actually very refreshing.
Yeah, yeah, I know, and I think, I mean, it obviously depends on the technology you're using in the stack, but at least for my own development, I work predominantly in Go, and I can't remember the last time I deployed something onto Kubernetes where I really needed the container, right? I always just
Right.
compiled down to the binary and then ran the binary. Well, with this, I can skip the container, I can upload it and have it run directly in its own environment. So, obviously that's not going to work for everyone, but if that's kind of the world that you live in, where you're fundamentally just deploying compiled binaries and you're just using the container as the runtime for it, now you can get rid of that. You can just upload your binary directly to an object store, tell at the cloud applications where it lives, and then you're off to the races. You don't have to, and it all lives in your account, right? So you have control over the object store, you have control over where the binary is uploaded, all of that. So yeah.
Beautiful. Love it. This is super cool. I'm curious to know, those of you who are watching, whether this is something that sounds exciting, or if you have any questions about it. I think this is rad. I'm excited to play with this. Um, and so, yeah, with just those two commands, we've got an application deployed in our Synadia Cloud. Just to prove it's up and running, we run the nat CLI just like normal, and we can call a function, which is awesome. Um, so we deployed a function. We're calling it via the nat CLI, and then we could spin down this app, right? We could just tell the app to stop, and it'll stop. So if you guys are interested in this, we have the Synadia Cloud Applications Beta on this page. You could just go to synadia.com, learn, blog, and it's going to be the first one here. Go ahead and sign up. We'd love to kind of hear, if this is something that's interesting to you or you'd like to utilize in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, it is in beta. We're still going to be working out some kinks. There will be missing features and stuff like that. But yeah, being an early adopter here could be really really fun. I think this is a brilliant way to deploy workloads and very simple. And simple is very refreshing in a
Yeah.
lot of cases. So if you're all in on Nats or you want to join the Nothing But Nats crowd, then yeah, go ahead and do this. I'm sure going to be joining in and doing this. I can't wait to get this up and running.
Yeah, definitely join the Nothing But Nats crowd. You'll love it, and you'll never look back once you kind of adopt that methodology and thinking. Then it's because you're not changing. I mean, that's the whole. I think just like Derek likes to say, we're not changing the what, we're just changing the how, right? And if you can just kind of change how you do some of the things, life becomes so much easier. It's so
Yeah,
much easier. Yeah.
awesome. I'd love to manage everything through my NAT CLI. That sounds brilliant.
Yeah.
Or through a
Yeah.
couple CLI tools. So before, I know you probably don't have all the time in the world, but before you go, I do have one question just around like we just talked about two big things. We talked about being able to put your own system into Synadia Cloud. And then we talked about this beta of being able to like run your own apps. And presumably this really only works kind of on like Synadia Cloud, but like are there plans one day to be able to like run these Synadia Cloud applications but like on your own hardware or like at the edge or things like that?
Yeah, for sure. So I know Kevin and team. I mean, are working hard to get this out. But I know on their roadmap definitely is this idea of being able to extend sort of the Nexus, which is basically just the Next cluster that's running in Synadia applications. Be able to extend that out to your own potential Next cluster that you're running, whether it's on-prem or wherever. And so very similar to like with Bring Your Own NATs and Private Link, how we securely sort of connect your NATs cluster to cloud, it would be, essentially securely connecting your next deployment on-prem to cloud, and then being able to leverage the scheduling, the application scheduler, to say, hey, I want bits of this component or bits of this application deployed on my on-prem versus, I need these bits deployed in maybe in NGS where I need the global points of presence, and be able to kind of run your workloads like that. So it's definitely, that to me seems incredibly powerful and incredibly exciting. And I know that's definitely being, it's on the roadmap. Obviously, there's a large number of things that need to be worked through there, but that is definitely kind of the next, I think, evolution of what applications will be, as we're trying to bridge some of these gaps.
Dude, that's brilliant. And I just thought of something that I think is it makes this even more powerful, which is like let's just say we have Synadia Cloud, and then we have our own system here, which is like a Leaf node. Um, I think this is kind of the power of, and why I think the positioning for this is actually really cool. Is you have Synadia Cloud, which Synadia Cloud is, it's proprietary technology. It's IP of Synadia, and we know that's always a tricky thing to navigate when you have this really comprehensive open source product like NATS. And then you're like, okay, how do we introduce IP as a business? And it sounds like, the way we've gone about it is like, well, instead of saying that NATS is open core and that we're going to hide features of NATS from you until you pay us money, that we wanted to build really good tooling and support around it. And like, and I think Synadia Cloud has been able to kind of, show that we could do that, by introducing Synadia platform and having these things all still like good, invest heavily into the NATS ecosystem. And I think that it's similar with how the story of Nex is going, where like you can be running your server here and you're running, it's all NATS and it's all Nex. And maybe, sure, you have like you might have a Synadia private link, which is free to download, doesn't cost any money to use it or anything like that. Running there to just link it up. But like you're running all complete open source technology on your hardware. 100% open source technology. You could run it however you want. Yet it's being managed and improved by like a commercial product, which I actually think is cool because it doesn't provide this like really strange lock-in. It's all like value-added lock-in, which I think is a good thing to have. It doesn't feel slimy. It doesn't feel like there's like a way to do a big rug pull from this. It really feels like, cool, you want to run an open, we know you want to run an open source stack. Like that's why you're using NATS. And so how do we help complement that without like, without losing trust in that relationship? And I feel like being able to say like, cool, we have this stuff available to you. We have it for convenience if you want to run a global cluster, but if you want to run a full open source stack and then just have the Synadia Cloud thing complement it, make deployments easier, make management easier, like you can totally do that. And I just really like that positioning. It feels very open source friendly to me. I don't know what you think. I know you're a huge open source proponent, Seth.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that's definitely from day one. It's been, we want to do things that help users, with, management or make their life easier, but everything is fundamentally powered on and runs on the open source stack. So you can do everything that Synadia Cloud does using all the open source stuff. We just try to give you value add to say, hey, we can make these things easier in certain situations. But yeah, it's definitely, you're not locking yourself into anything that won't work 100% on the open source products. So if you decide you're done with using cloud, you want to just go back to managing it on your own, well, guess what? I mean, that's like, it just works, right? You haven't done anything proprietary,
Right.
With the Synadia Cloud. So yeah, it's definitely not hiding or not not extending any of the OSS products in a way that you can't get access to them just by doing anything with the open source side of things. So yeah, and I know with the applications with Nex and all of that, it's very much the same approach, right? It's
Yeah.
all Nex is all that open source, all the tooling around it, everything is working. It's cloud is just trying to complement it. So yeah.
The last thing I'll say before because I know you probably need to go, but you're welcome to stay if you can. But I'll answer
Sure.
some questions as well. The last thing I just want to say here is I know that there's like there's a saying that kind of goes around, especially your team, which is like in the realm of like we want to try to do our best to stay out of critical path, right?
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Which is like if you're running a remote system, maybe you're even running like Nex or Synadia Cloud, someday Synadia Cloud on your remote system, Synadia Cloud applications on your remote system via Nex. Like if Synadia Cloud goes down, like your system's still running,
Yes.
right? You're still up.
Mm-hmm.
You might not be able to like go do a deployment if as long as we're down, but we have our own SLAs. We'll keep it up. Don't worry. But but like in the event that this goes down, it's not like your system automatically goes down. There's really a good separation of concerns here, and that's part of the value prop as well, and why I feel like Synadia Cloud's this really great complement to the system. But as you said, you can still this is all still running on open, like the critical path is all running on open source, and I think
Yeah.
that's like really a really good value prop for a lot of people who are like to we want to stay an open source stack. We don't want to create this very, very strange mix of commercial and open source. And so hopefully we've thread that needle a bit. I know Derek's a huge proponent of like not doing open core model. And I know there's been drama, in the recent past about around all of that. With various technologies, but yeah, I'm happy to see kind of all this coming together.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, just to highlight your point, yeah, that's something that our team always thinks about whenever we have a new feature that we're trying to add. It's we cannot be a dependency, right? Your NATS infrastructure has to run, has to work, has to be functional without us. Sure, I mean there might be the ease of use and convenience things that you can't do if we're down, but we cannot be a dependency. I mean, and obviously that lets us sleep better at night, but it also, I think, is just part of that core, sort of ideology of it's your deployment and what you're running. We want to make sure that that it functions regardless of what we're doing. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Seth. If you have to hop off, feel free to. But I'm going to get into question answering mode.
Sure, I do have to go, but it was great, and I love doing these things. I don't do them nearly enough, so I will be sure to join you in the future. I know you always have an open invitation for us, and
We
and
do. Yeah.
I'll definitely jump back on. It's been great. But
All right. Thanks so
I,
much for joining
yeah,
us, Seth.
thank you.
All right.
Take care.
All right, chat. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in. I'm going to go ahead and start copying and pasting some things over here so we can just start getting into some topics. Once again, if you are new here, the way that I like to answer questions is like literally ask me anything. I like questions that are deeper, that require me to go to the whiteboard and like draw things. So if that's how, like if you have a question that requires some big explanation around NATs, I'm happy to entertain that. We have about less than 15 minutes, so I'll go ahead and start like copying and pasting some questions that are coming in from the various chats, and we'll get into it. So all right, let's copy this one, and then I'll jump back over to Riverside and say, oh, and then Maurice just commented, nice shirt, by the way, Jeremy, systems distributed. Yeah, I think I'm backwards. I might need to fix the mirroring here, but I was at Systems Distributed a few weeks ago. It was fantastic conference. It's a small conference, but it's so worth going to. If you're in the Zig community at all, or you just want to talk about distributed systems with some of the best and finest, like, open source database maintainers and things like that. Folks who are doing all kinds of really great stuff around deterministic testing inside of these systems. There's so many smart folks in there. So I highly encourage people to try to attend that conference. It's totally worth going in person to next year. And if you do, I'll probably see you there because I'm going to be going again. Okay, so yeah, let's get into some of these questions. So yeah, Dixon made a comment saying being able to position in and out of the cloud, including on-prem, may be important to things like GDPR. I 100% agree. I think somebody else also mentioned it on Twitch. The idea that considering Sorenzi, who's also added some great input today, also mentioned on Twitch that considering different regulatory reasons, the on-prem versions of Synadia Cloud applications are really interesting. Yeah, this has been one of our biggest, honestly, like one of our biggest hurdles for adoption for some of these technologies for us. I'll be real, and one of the reasons is because people are using NATs for like hardcore stuff. Like they're transferring data that's not trivial, that's important, that could include PII. GDPR is a thing. So like HIPAA is a thing. There's all kinds of regulatory reasons why folks won't necessarily be able to use the globally available Synadia Cloud, and that makes total sense to us. We are very aware of it, which is why we're investing in this. So we do have Synadia Platform, which is basically like, if you were to the way I like to describe Synadia Platform is like, you can go to github.com and use GitHub, but then you could also be like, I want my own GitHub, and you could talk to GitHub and they'll give you your own GitHub. It's just called GitHub Enterprise, and that's what Synadia Platform is. And so it's literally the same code base. Like, we run Synadia Cloud by running our own Synadia Platform for us as the customer. And we do that because we want to dog food all of this technology and make sure that it's like up to our standards with that stuff. And so all the experience that you get in like going on to Synadia Cloud and managing that stuff, that's all available in Synadia Platform. And you could just self-host it or meet those regulatory compliance things. And so you might go that direction, but also being able to say, hey, I can run a remote system in Synadia Cloud. I think that meets folks in the middle, right? Where you still might have some metrics and monitoring happening on the Synadia Cloud side, but that might still be able to meet your regulatory requirements because there's no like very, very, very important information that's going over the wire in this like global deployment, right? So you'll have to kind of think through what it looks like for your organization, but it's definitely it definitely gives you more options in terms of like what what might meet your needs there. Daniel says there was an all-in on Nats crowd analogy, or is it there someplace Discord community site? Actually, that's a great question. I think there's a. Oh no, we have it. I think it's in our Synadia Discord. There's Synadia Slack. We should really create one in inside of the Nats Slack. In fact, I might just do that today. So there isn't it's an unofficial community that we have of people that are wanting to build almost their entire application using Nats as kind of their core infrastructure. And so we should try to create a little community around it, maybe even some t-shirts if folks are interested. If you are like building an application and trying to utilize Nats as much as possible for it, do sound off in the chat. I want to kind of hear more about what you're doing, how you're doing that. And maybe we do create a little bit of of a movement around it. I think that would be super fun. Okay, we got a couple more questions that just popped in. Good to know, Maurice, that it's not mirrored, that you can read it. It's just probably mirrored on my end. That was one that I already did. Let's grab one more. So Cliff asks a question saying, are leaf nodes expensive? Would it make sense to build an IoT system with hundreds of nodes and each one is a leaf node? So in Synadia Cloud, we do price leaf nodes a certain way, but like that doesn't. I would say if you have a unique use case, especially an IoT use case with leaf nodes, that you talk to us. So like go to synadia.com, fill out our contact form. Get in touch with us because we can come up with custom contracts. The thing is like leaf nodes are just really hard to price. That's what it is at the end of the day. They're really hard to price. We can't price them at cost because cost varies wildly. And cost trying to find a single value based pricing for them. It can also like just be a huge issue as well because like think about it, a NAS leaf node could be a lot of things, right? And this is just listing off like customers and users we've worked with. Like this could be a car, right? We could have leaf nodes in a car. We could have leaf nodes on a train. We can have, oh my gosh, I don't know how to type today. We can have leaf nodes in a car. We can have leaf nodes on a train. We could have leaf nodes in like a toothbrush. We could have leaf nodes that are powering like a processing plant or a factory floor. And those things from an economic and value standpoint, or the economic like value that brings to that particular organization, vary wildly. And so if you are doing like an IoT use case with Nats, just talk to us. Like the pricing on the pricing on Synadia Cloud, we try to meet as many people where they're at, but we can't always meet everybody where they're at, and that's why it's like just talk to us, and we could try to come up with a good solution together. So we'd love to hear more about the use case. Okay. Tony says, what type of enterprise deployment strategies are you using to manage an on-premise ecosystem of NATs and Next nodes? It still remains for us to kind of learn more about it, and this is why we're in beta. Is we want to partner with some more customers to learn what enterprise deployment looks like for us. Obviously, enterprise deployment comes down to like an organizational challenge, right? But we've worked with enough organizations and what it looks like for us to like secure these applications, who's involved, security teams, sec DevOps, stuff like that, IAC tooling, things like that, to the point where I think we have some good primitives in place. It's not like we necessarily have everything solved everywhere. We don't have Pulumi and Terraform support, for everything, but we're getting close to stuff like that. So if you have an organization that's maybe willing to try things out, or that have a greenfield project that they want to work with us on, I think that would be a really good fit. But the other thing to kind of consider here is that like this is a much simpler workflow than what folks have gotten used to. So it might even seem a little like foreign because it like in some cases it's almost like oh, that's it kind of feeling that you get, because it's a lot less complexity in general. Things are kind of at your fingertips, and I would say that there's a fluidity, just like everything in Nats has like this fluidity to it, where it kind of feels like, oh, that's pretty minimal, but also that's like super flexible, and I don't have to do all this upfront planning in order to accomplish what I need to. So if you're interested in partnering with us in some way, shape, or form to kind of like work through some of the kinks, or figure out what's more valuable, we've done our best with the customer base that we already engage with, but we're always looking for more folks to partner with us in that way. Cool. Tony says he's building an LLM multi-agent system using NATs and now Next. This is built as an alternative. I'm going to just show this on the screen. Built an alternative to Microsoft's AutoGen framework. Will be backed by Llama 3.1 using OLlama as the LLM hosting platform. NATs and Next may allow me to dynamically manage this environment. Absolutely. Honestly, yeah, Tony, if you're doing anything AI related, AI workload related, where you're doing any sort of scheduling on particular sets of GPUs or things like that, Nats and Next was literally, I don't want to say it's the only use case we designed it for, but it's one of the use cases we are absolutely designing for intentionally, because I feel like there's such a great fit. And to my earlier point, like I think a workflow around AI, LLM inference and scheduling on GPUs in general is like a total, like you need that fluidity, you need that location transparency, you need that speed to be able to do those things quickly. And you're not the only person thinking about that, and also thinking about NATs. I think that we're getting a lot of demand for something like this in that space. So absolutely talk to us. We'd love to hear more about what you're doing. Before Maurice said, I felt like the load balancers and proxies are just the natural thing to do, and then getting to know NATs, there's actually so much that can be simplified with a smarter technology. Absolutely. Like, and the way I can think about NATs, you could be very reductionist about it, and you could be like, well, NATs is just like one big proxy that's distributed. And it was like, yeah, but that actually, like the fact that, like, imagine for a second that you have one big proxy that's distributed and that is geo aware and that can like route between all of these things. I mean, that's a router. You now have like software networking, and you have the fluidity without, the rigidity of traditional networking, right? And there's a lot of power that comes in that. And I think being able to, like, a lot of these proxies are kind of working around constraints in other systems, right? Like the fact that, oh my gosh, I'm going to be really confusing right now, because I'm talking about, I talk about NATs, but now I'm going to talk about NATs, like the network address traversal. And like, I mean, there's lots of limitations in our kind of, bare bones, like networking and routing. And I think a lot of the technologies like load balancers and stuff are trying to work around those limitations. Whereas NATS kind of like takes a step back and says, well, what if we rethought about a lot of this stuff? And what if our workaround for the networking technologies was like to throw it all out and start with a really like software like layer. And then instead of saying that a packet is your like primitive, that a message is your primitive. And if you take those two simple ideas and combine that with stuff like subject-based addressing, you get some really cool expressivity inside of your system. And so I think NATS absolutely can be that foundational technology for a lot of this stuff. And I'm excited to see where all of this goes. Honestly, I think it's really, really cool. I think that's probably about all the questions we got. Dixon talks more about having a GDPR reference discussion and implementation would be brilliant. Yep, GDPR is definitely something we support and I think in some ways better than some other messaging and streaming technologies because we are able to get at data that needs to be deleted and you can actually delete it, right? We're not an append only log. An append only log doesn't work well with GDPR. A true append only log doesn't work well with GDPR because you need to delete things. So yeah, right to be forgotten, respecting some of those GDPR, PII issues, scrubbing, stuff like that is all stuff that I can is easier to do in NATS, I think, than other technologies. Cool. Well, that about does it for our time. I hope folks who joined us got a lot of value out of this. I think there's some really cool stuff coming up on the Synadia front. And as always, like we're a small company, and like NATS is such a big, broad ecosystem. If you feel like that, pricing might be getting in the way of what you're trying to do, because you might have an interesting use case that's just not fitting in the box, like Tony was mentioning, just talk to us. Like we like to try to solve hard problems. If you come to us with an interesting one and we want to try to, accommodate you. So yeah, do reach out to us, let us know. And I'll see everybody next week on the very next office hours. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for all of the questions that were asked. Really 100% awesome, everybody. Thanks for joining. And I will see all y'all next week. Cheers.